And then we'll, if you have any team members that want to watch it later on, you can always send it to them. We'll send you the link for that. But again, thanks for being a partner with us and having your interest in Nebula. So just an overall general overview of what Nebula is. As you probably already know, it consists of a cloud solution gateway, a whole cloud solution that consists of the control center, which is basically the cloud brains that manages and configures all these devices that are out in the field. There's a mobile application that lets you do the provisioning. We're also enhancing that, as we had mentioned when we visited you guys, that we would enhance it to also give you a little bit more information, feedback on what's happening on the network, give you visibility of what's going on. And of course, again, anything that you find useful or would be useful, please feedback that to us. That's where the partnership happens, allowing for us to further develop and enhance the products to fulfill your needs. It consists of the gateway, which is the firewall, which we've now also include the content filtering, the antivirus, as well as the IDP4. And I'll talk to you a little bit more how the licensing of that is changing or migrates from what you currently have right now. And then the cloud switches to have PoE and also non-PoE applications. And then, of course, the access points, which is primarily the major driver of Nebula, because that's the biggest component of the number of units that you have to manage typically in an application. For sites could be anywhere between a couple APs all the way to, hotels and things that can have hundreds of APs potentially. So being able to manage all that in a single pane of glass in a central place is what, is beneficial, and that's what Nebula provides for us. So the product portfolio is kind of ever expanding in some ways. The APs, you get the whole range of the 2x2 access points all the way to the smart antenna and outdoor solutions as well. Of course, we've added, you'll see some of the Nebula Flex models that are available, like the wall jack or the wall mounted APs. That can be either standalone or be used on Nebula. So keep an eye out for that model if that's something that's interesting to you. We have partners already, starting to place orders and taking that on now. Of course, we're also launching our Nebula Flex switches, which is our 1920 Series V2 models that will be coming out. Those will be Nebula Flex, meaning that it can be purchased and used as a standalone, but then you can flip the switch and it will grab the Nebula firmware so that you can manage it in your existing Nebula platform. You just have to add the license. It comes with the Nebula Flex, which is the free or the Nebula free license out of the box. And then if you wanted to use underneath your full controller, the full featured controller, then you have to add on the licensing for that. And then our NSG models, the multi-WAN security gateways that does pretty much full UTM now. Again, it's still not to the level, if you're used to our USG series, it's not the in-depth full-featured as the USG series. So if there's some complex applications that you're looking forward to do, we're continuing to enhance the NSG series to get a little bit closer, but it's still the fundamental philosophy is how do we keep the installation, configuration, and the network management of it as simple as possible. So we're finding, we're getting feedback from customers on what works and what doesn't, what they need or what they absolutely need for their day-to-day business. So of course it's easy, to use. Adopting Nebula, like we had mentioned before, it's really one solution. Everything is under one umbrella, and it could fit pretty much any network application that's out there, and then different scales as well. We have customers who are doing, single doctor's offices where there's only a single AP, a gateway, and a switch, and they're just deploying those as a cookie cutter application, and just deploying them and just cloning the site, getting a new customer, and sending that off with those pretty much exact configurations, pretty much, all the way up to larger hotel deployments or senior living facilities, etc. Just again, a wide range of applications that can be used by it. There's no additional necessarily software to install on an external server or anything like that. So all you need to do is, buy into the hardware and the cloud licensing, and that's all managed, within that central location. So kind of upfront cost of things, it's really, cost effective to get started right away. And especially if you're looking on the managed service side of things, we're looking at creative ways to helping you to not have to, expend like a giant capital expense just to build out an infrastructure for our customer, being able to work with us, with our leasing company or with your leasing companies, et cetera, to kind of make it into a monthly payment plan. And that way you can immediately realize profits like right away from day one from the hardware and the software solution. Of course, it's easy to deploy. So if you guys already have a kit and you haven't yet installed it yet, then hopefully you'll get to do that right after our webinar, so you can take a look at that. One important thing to do is make sure that you have a MyZycel account. If you're already a long-time Zycel customer, or you've installed like USG products for the UTM licenses, then you already have an account there. So now we just have to basically, it bridges that same login into the Nebula Control Center. So create that account first, and then it allows for you then to have a Nebula account to which you can then add devices to it. So let me go right here real quick. Let me grab one of these APs. So I don't know if you can see, but on the box itself, typically there's the UPC code and also a 2D QR code that you can use to scan. And what you do is you either use the app to basically scan the devices into your site that you want it to load into. So you can use the Apple or Android app, scan in the QR code either through the box without having to unbox the device, or if you do unbox the device, there's also a QR code, on the belly label side as well. So you basically scan those in. Let's say you have 15 of these. It's real easy for you to just go scan, 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 and then say which sites they belong to without even having to power up the device. So you can do that. Then once the devices come online, you can then either configure it, or you can even pre-configure it without it even coming online yet. So that's the prime example would be, let's say you already have a kind of a default cloned site that for like I mentioned earlier, like a doctor's office, we have one AP, one gateway, one switch. We have it already configured the way that you would want to deploy it for that kind of standard site. You clone it to, let's say, a new customer site. You make the tweaks like the public IP address or any other SSID changes that you may do just to match that particular customer. But all the security functions, what ports that are going to be plugged in and powered on with PoE, et cetera, is already pre-configured from your cookie cutter. And then you scan the devices in, and then you assign it to that site. And so once the device comes online, it will grab the any new firmware that it's required, and then also grab the configuration that was assigned to it by that site. So literally within minutes, you can get a site online, and you don't need a technical guy, a networking tech, one who has to log into a GUI of any sort to be able to do this installation. You can probably get it down to almost like a DSL install kit, right, where you have, here's your 3 devices. We give you the instructions. You can create an SOP instruction that says, hey, plug in this to port 1, plug this into the next port, install the AP, power them on, or whatever it is, and turn these boxes on, connect it to the internet connection, and once it's all calls back to home, then it's done. That you can have a non-network tech do the installation at the site if necessary. So you can contract that out, especially then your reach can go a lot further. I'm sure there's tons of kind of like Uber-esque like apps that are focused on maybe networking consultants or just third-party kind of persons who have networking skill that you can utilize and contract out or subcontract out to do those kinds of installations. So then your reach can go a lot further. You can just ship it to the site. The the installer just comes there, or even the the IT person there, or the even front desk, or the manager of the office, or whoever can follow the instructions to get those online. So then you can also use the app to kind of remember where you've installed it. So it allows for you to photo capture. If you have like your installer, he can set up so he has like an installation account on his app, and then it allows for him to then, once he's installed it, he'd take a picture of it where he's installed it, so that it actually keeps record of it into the cloud. So that next time you have another technician come, he's not just blind. Where is the access point I'm looking for that particular device that I just the guy installed a year ago. So you can go out and you can take a look, and any of those pictures can be saved within the cloud. So that just overall just kind of adds to the simplicity of the installation. And then of course you get all the views on the dashboard within the app, of all your Nebula devices. Again, we're enhancing it so that then you can have permissions to, maybe the IT managers and such will allow for them to do different types of things while in that app. The product also, pretty much seamlessly integrates into any network. You don't necessarily have to have a Nebula gateway, an AP, and a switch in order to take advantage of Nebula. If you already have an existing switch or gateway that is in the field, you can always add the APs just for the network at the time. So there's not a requirement of that. The only thing is you may have to consider, if there's an older PoE switch, it might not have enough power to power the APs, especially if you're using the higher end models that are using 11AC with multiple, smart antenna configurations. So, it's best to do it because now you then gain visibility not only from the AP side in the cloud, but then the switches and the gateways, right? So it's a whole solution, whole visibility, rather than going, hey, something is down, but I can't tell if it's the switch or the APs functioning. So you can get a better view of the whole system when you're using all Nebula. And of course, all the Nebula devices just call home. So you don't need to punch a hole in the firewall. You don't have to configure anything. So you can really deploy into an existing network. As long as it has logical, internet access out to the internet, it will find its way to basically create a tunnel back to the Nebula's, to the Cloud Control Center. It's also easy to operate. Of course, if some of you have already managed it yourself, there's a whole section. Once I get to the GUI kind of display, you'll see kind of how the whole thing is laid out. But one thing we take pride in is, of course, is our hardware design. So we always take into consideration about how well the Wi-Fi works and also the longevity of the hardware. So we take into account and use solid state capacitors to make sure that the product lasts for a long time. So you can look at our MTBFs and compare it to a lot of the competitors out there. The competitors typically are the low, especially even the low end competitors, they offer like a 1 year or 2 year warranty, hardware warranty on the device. But based on what we've designed and how we feel comfortable in the MTBFs that are on these products, we give it a lifetime warranty on it. Of course, you can see if you've been able to open the device, the shielding that you see, we take great care and pride in that as well, to make sure that it's not interfering with other APs, or at least mitigating as much as possible, and then keeping it from interfering with itself, right? Because a lot of the interference is happening on the PCB board itself. So we have shielding channels. It's being shielded, covered, as well as shielded from the antenna array as well. So all those kind of take an effect. What we find is that you potentially increase the power efficiency of the radio by up to like 300% compared to not when you don't do any of the shielding. So we've really improved on that. So especially in this day and age, you guys are deploying not just a single AP in a no AP environment. It's always multiple APs in an environment that already has, probably 15 APs that are in that coverage area, right? Even in my home, even though the houses are far apart, I still see like 15 SSIDs that's, interfering with the whole network. So we have to find ways to mitigate it, and that's where our products, really shine and come into play from the design, et cetera. And then you get peace of mind from the network management. You get that visibility on anything that's being done on the cloud controller, especially maybe you have regulations or from a security or HIPAA compliancy, that kind of thing. Configuration logging is very important. It records, what's being done and by who and what devices. You can kind of have that log visibility if you have to go back and audit that. You can also protects you from misconfiguration. So there's always that common potential, where you have a new technician come in and he goes, and I'll set the VLAN of this port to be, VLAN 10, but then realizes that that's the management VLAN he just changed. And now, you've lost connectivity, or you've changed the IP address and now you've lost connectivity to the device. So it actually has, within our devices, it has actually misconfiguration protection. So in the event that you do make that change and it loses connectivity, within 5 minutes, it's going to revert back if it can't dial home to its control center. So that helps to prevent you having to go out to physically make any kind of weird changes or anything like that, or reboot the device or anything like that. So that's a very effective way to do that, and also allows for you to schedule firmware upgrades. When you're talking on the scale of tens, 20s, hundreds of devices, making sure that the devices are up to date with either firmware or configuration can be a daunting task. But we simplify that by allowing for you to do scheduled upgrades. So you can set what access point groups and devices are going to be installed at what time. And we also give kind of value back. One of the hardest things to sell on a cloud solution to to kind of any customer is the kind of the thought that how do I provide a service and charge for it? So some of the things that we give back or arm you with is to kind of give you that visibility, so you can have scheduled summary reports that are delivered to you, so that you can either digest it, recolor them, or however you may want to do it, and send that summary report to the customer to kind of show, hey, this is what's been done. These are your top use devices. This is the visibility that we gain by using Nebula, and all that data information, where the traffic is going, who is using the most traffic, which APs are being overloaded, really gives you then that ability to take proactive steps. So then when you can see, hey, it looks like, the IT room gateway is getting overloaded. There's 20 people there on average. We can at least say, hey, let's go ahead and put a second AP there, so we can do load balancing to make sure that the quality of service of it and the channel interruption or co-channel interference is being mitigated as best as possible. So this is just another example of just the schedule reports that you can do. Again, you can send it and make some updates. You can send it with you can upload a logo to it as well. So you can put your company logo there. Some of the report can already become, you can either send it direct to your customer, or you can send it to yourself, make changes however you want, and then send it off to your customer. Of course, we're looking into enhancing this as well. So any feedback that you have in terms of flexibility in how maybe the widget is configured, or what data information you want to include within that summary report, or or what kind of details you want to see, let us know so that we can further improve on that. My hope, my desire is so that we can make it so that there's some, default reports that you can just use out of the box, or you can customize it and make it so you can change, if you want to showcase the virus threats and bandwidth utilization, as the main point of your report, and then the other data information, or you checkbox what you want to put in what order. That would be kind of my push on what we want to do. So we'll see how it turns out in the coming months as the product continues to evolve. And of course, you're monitoring the whole network from a single pane of glass. You can see all your devices, the utilization. You can see the top applications that are being used within the last 24 hours, et cetera, the clients that are using it. Right, so that's where we can give access, or you can give access to your end customers to have the dashboard view. They can look at what's going on within their site or organization, and but not make any changes. So you can set those authorities there, so that you can give your customer IT folk this kind of view, again, to add value on what is actually happening. Why is it a benefit to have all this information in a single place about their network? So it's really valuable in that. Or you can come here to take screenshots or whatever to add or supplement to any of the reports that you want to do. We also provide flexible licensing options. So with Nebula, depending on your business model or depending on what your customer is looking at doing, we have 3 options. One is the Nebula free. This is what anything will default to. So Nebula Flex products come with at least the free functionality. So it has, some of the major, feature sets that are there. The log, though, is limited to only about 7 days rather than a whole year's worth of logs. There's a lot of other features that I'll show within the GUI, how you can tell that it's, a paid or a professional pack version. But everything, if you don't, let's say you're on the professional pack, licensing and your product expires, unlike other competitors where they will just shut down your device because you don't have a valid license key, we actually downgrade the devices to still function, but from a management standpoint, it's now operating in the management field of the free licensing space until you pay for your license or renew. Then it comes back to the professional grade. Now the professional grade is a yearly subscription or a 2-year or a 4-year. We have licenses that fulfill that. But if you're looking at maybe like a 3 or 4 year minimum that you want to have a relationship with your customer, we'd advise for you to take advantage of the lifetime. It's a one-time, basically one-time payment license that allows for you to unlock the cloud node for that device for the life of that product. Actually, it's tied to the organization itself. So if you have an organization that wants to take advantage of that professional pack, or the site that takes advantage of that lifetime pack, we can make that entire site that. So then no matter what products you put in there, they all have to be a lifetime product that comes in and added to that site. But whether you switch them out, it will always be lifetime within that. So if you're doing a break fix, the other product that you put in to replace it will include the lifetime. So it keeps that lifetime node count, there within the site. So that way it's easier for you. It's a one-time investment, but then you can, gain benefits, especially in that 3rd or 4th year. It's basically paid for. So all the margin that was going to kind of subsidize the cloud at that point is no longer there. So you would have full margin benefit from that, providing that service. Okay, are there any questions before I go and jump into the GUI side of things here? If you're able to, you can unmute yourself, you can ask a question. If not, or if you have issues with that, you can always raise your hand or ask a question in the Q&A. So there's no questions at this time. I'm gonna go ahead and jump into the dashboard of the GUI. So to get to, if you're looking at, if you've installed it already, or you're looking to connect into the Nebula side, just go to nebula.zycel.com. You can either click here to go to the live demo, or you can log in, especially if you already have an account, or if you're looking at installing your install kit. So the AP. Now, if you don't have an install kit yet, reach out to your sales rep, either David or Sandy. We'll get a kit out to you. Typically, it's like a NSG gateway, a 8-port or 10-port switch with PoE and an access point or 2, and we'll send that off to you, as your install trial kit, and you could be able to kind of get it all online, see the ease of use of that, getting it online, and then going through the GUI interface. So let me go ahead and log in here. Let's see, where's the login? I get this every once in a while. Let me see if I can get it to log out. There you go. All right, so I'm in the organization. I'm just going to go to the free Nebula organization here. As you can see at the top, it says this organization is using free version of Nebula. Advanced features can be unlocked by purchasing the Pro Pack license. So this is what you would see is if you didn't have the full-fledged version. Derek did ask a question about the ability to schedule reports automatically. Is that coming soon instead of clicking to generate it? Yeah, so in this, I'll double check here. In the slide, apparently there is a schedule, a scheduling that allows for you to schedule the summary reports that get sent out. So you can either do it manually or to schedule the reports. And so we'll see when we get there exactly where that kind of area is. So from the dashboard, you get that visibility of all the devices, your throughputs, any traffic utilization. Right now, I only have a single access point, a single switch, and a single gateway on this particular free demo site, or just this free Nebula site on my account. So you can look at in the site-wide. These are where the top row here. Actually, let me go to the very top. This is where you would set organizations and create different organizations that you want to manage. Now, in order to get organizations, you want to be able to get, I think it's the MSP view. So I think it's you have to request for that MSP view, and then we would enable it for you so that you can set up multiple organizations. But let's say you have your organization there, you can then configure each site. So it depends on how you want to kind of scale or tier your customers. Typically, let's say you have a hotel chain, the organization would be that hotel chain name, and each one of the hotels would be a different site. So that's how you would probably manage that level of customer. Now, if you want to break it into regions and things like that, you can always say, hey, the organization is East Coast, West Coast, and then the sites are the individual sites within those regions. It just depends on how you want to manage. It does also get kind of tricky. Depends on, again, how you want to manage the licensing. If you're looking at doing kind of a lifetime pack, you may want to have an account that is all the devices that are on, just like lifetime, the lifetime professional, so that you kind of manage it on its own. That the devices that are added to that need that lifetime licensing. That way there's not a mix of non-lifetime and lifetime that you're trying to manage mentally. You could just manage that out there. I was just reading your question there, TJ. Give me a second. I'll try to digest that long question in just a bit. Okay, so then on the site-wide side, you have the access to the dashboard, which is what you see here. You have the summary report, to which you can get an information of it. You can see here that I'm not allowed to click on emailing the report to myself, because you'll notice that when you're in the free version of Nebula, anything that has this little kind of upgrade button means that feature is locked and it's only available for the full Pro Pack license. So emailing the summary reports to yourself is not available in this particular case. You can set up the date ranges. You can see that within the free, it only lets you go up to the 7 days, but with the upgraded versions, you can go up to a year back. Okay, so there's a summary report, and you can also tie it in with a map. On the professional pack version, there's also a topology. Let me see if one of these other sites, I don't know if they have, even though there's no devices on it. Let me see if it's still a free version on this one. I don't know why when we got this site created that they didn't give me the full license version. So sorry about that. I apologize for that. We can always dive in deeper on that to see if you have any questions later on with your site particularly. We can always help you and log in and show you where to go. But you can set up the whole site having a general site-wide configuration with captive portal authentication, SNMP, the reporting, if you're reporting to a syslog server. That's something that we've added and integrated. Some of you have requested that, hey, we want to be able to tie into our existing syslog server or third-party server that we can send all of the major Nebula device reporting using SNMP to that syslog server. So we have the ability to add that now. So you can use your existing software, management software to get that information, or your syslog server. You can then schedule all of the upgrades there. And here's also where you would add the device. So now if you didn't want to use the mobile app, you could use and manually type in the MAC serial number combinations and then choose which site that device happens to go on. So you can do that here. On the access point, so each one of the access point, the switch, and the gateways have their own tabs for configuration. So there's a monitoring tab. So the first sections, the top area under monitor, it lets you see what's going on the network. The access point, what access points are there, if there are any clients that are associated to it, what kind of bandwidth it's using in the last few hours, or et cetera. Or there's an event log, so it can show like associations and disassociations, or maybe issues with the key share or something like that, if you wanted to troubleshoot that. And again, also a summary report of just the access points. So you have summary reports that can happen either site-wide or by the devices that are in there. But then, of course, the more interesting side of things is when you get to the configuration of it. So within the access point configurations, you can set up different SSID profiles. You can set up the authentications of those SSIDs, the captive portal utilization. So that's the kind of the hotspot functionality. The band utilization, if you want to include any VLAN for that SSID as well. That's where you configure it. We've also added SSID scheduling. So you can actually create an SSID schedule, and you can customize it, or you can choose some basic ones that we already have. If you want to have weekdays only, that's when the SSID is available. Now, if you think about it, there's actually a kind of a cool application to this, especially again for managing Wi-Fi for your customers. Let's say you're managing a hotel and you know that on weekends they're going to have a conference pretty much every weekend, or you want to enable that kind of situation. You can, let's say, have a weekend conference schedule. You can create a special SSID for that conference, and then enable it for just that time frame. So right now we're looking at enhancing it so you can give not only a weekdays only, like not just by weeks, but also probably do by date time. So you can say, well, these 3 weekends, this SSID is going to fire up and be available with these credentials to have access, so that the conference people can log on to that. Or the other benefit of this is having the ability to turn on and off SSIDs that you don't want, people to access outside of business hours. So you can say, I want available 8 to 5 daily, and customize it however you may want, but then only during those business hours is that SSID available. Otherwise, it's not. So then it kind of prevents other users or potential security leaks and such. So you just apply that schedule to the SSID. So when you go back to the SSID here, you'll notice that there's a, when you edit the name, you can choose the schedule here. So I had created an 8 to 5, so you can choose that, and the broadcast SSID will just happen at 8 to 5. Authentication, we've enhanced some of the authentications methods on the device. We can use captive portal functions like click to continue, or you can sign on with Nebula Cloud Authentication, which means they have to create a username or password, which then you can either approve or auto approve, but then they can also tie into a Radius server. So if you have a Radius server that's handling that, so maybe you're providing a service that they've subscribed to, kind of like a what is that? I can't remember, when you go to a hotel or a hotspot like an airport, there's third-party services that lets you tie into that without having to purchase the kind of the daily or the hourly service. So you can use authentication, radius authentication, to provide that kind of service and they've subscribed to, and be able to access the internet through this through the captive portal. Or we've also now integrated Facebook login, so they can use their Facebook username and password, where it ties in with the Facebook side of it to the authentication to ensure that it's a legit Facebook username and password. And then once they're confirmed, some of that data information is also captured and then allows for the user to get out. Of course, there's walled garden, layer 2 isolation, inter-BSS blocking, features like that. Those are our typical Wi-Fi kind of feature functions that allow for them to keep everyone separate from one another. The other feature that is very beneficial to take a look at if you're not using it already, I'd mentioned in our webinar yesterday, is load balancing capabilities. So you can enable load balancing on the devices to say, hey, I want to enable by device number. So each AP that has this function enabled, it will only allow a maximum number of 10 client devices. The benefit of that is then it allows for when you have a high concentration of APs, let's say you have 4 APs all in the same conference room, you can make sure that it's load balanced to make sure that there's only 10 per AP at that point. So, that's a, very kind of a crude way of getting people to log in and not overload any single access point just because there's a lot more people over in that corner. We can force them to go to another AP, which is maybe a little bit less signal, but still perfectly fine to use, but make sure that they're over there. We can change the ability to also disassociate. So we can kind of force, and when there's a device that's overloaded, we can kick people off. But typically when we want to leave it on, we just want to mitigate as much as possible the number of people who go on a particular access point. The classroom mode, there's some more details on that. A lot of it is kind of like how fast it load balances between devices, and when you have 2 access points, like kind of in the same area. That's our usual classroom mode, is 2 access points in a single classroom, but managing up to 50 devices. Here, the max number is defaulted at 10, but you can always say more. And then smart steering, being able to steer the client to a better signal by disassociating them when their signal strength is at a certain level or they're too low. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the switch side of things. And so the switch view is pretty much the same when you're looking at kind of the overall view of the device. Derek had a question real quick. Says, can Nebula proactively send a notification for impending subscription expiration to give us a chance to have a customer renew the license? Or just notifies reactively once it expires? It actually will send you notifications, within that site if it's coming up for expiration. So it doesn't wait till it's expired. I think it's 60 days, 30 or 60 days prior to the site getting to a point of expiration. Now we typically also have we also give you a grace period as well. So if you happen to miss that date for whatever reason, if you miss those reminders, then there's still a chance for you. But the good thing is that worst case scenario is that it will go down to the free, which then all the devices are still working. And then once you have time to then reactivate the license, then it will go up to the Pro Pack version. So TJ, just going back to your question, I think I'll probably deal with that one, maybe a more one-on-one, just to kind of get a further clarification. We might have to have our support team kind of take a look at what you're seeing on your portal to kind of maybe figure out what's going on. One thing to keep in mind is even though the access point may have a 3-year bundle, if you add it to your site with a device, let's say a gateway that only has a 1-year bundle, what you'll see and notice is that your expiration date will be probably about 2 years or 2.3 years or so. It's because that, the baseline, there's a kind of a consumption. There's a number of credits that each product actually utilizes and takes up and consumes every year. And so it kind of averages it out to the whole system. That's how we manage kind of the co-termination, because you don't want to have to go, hey, this particular customer, this one's expiring this month, this one's expiring another month, and then if I added another AP, that one expires on a totally different month as well, right? So we actually utilize almost like a credit-based system that divides the cost, amongst the devices, and then you have your whole system cost and an expiration date. And that's all kind of explained out when you get to the organizational, the help here with the license calculator. It can tell you, based on either how many APs and the date you want it to expire from, how much the license is, or what your current organization utilization is. So you can go to the organization license management, and it'll tell you here, you have how many days remaining, based on how many points, your expiration. So like, for example, here, for an NAP, an NSW, and an NSG, we have one of each. So the number of Nebula points that you need to have to run for that year for these 3 devices is 115 points. And typically, if you bought an NAP with 1-year bundle, an NSW with 1-year bundle, and an NSG with 1-year bundle, it actually will conveniently add up to basically 115 points, right? So it's all mapped out within that. So even though it's a 1-year scheme, it will default to the 15, what it needs to have for the year. Now, one kind of word of advice as a managed service provider, you can look at the whole site wide and say, hey, you know what? I don't necessarily need to buy a year's worth of service. You can technically buy, we have in our price list what we call points, Nebula points. And so you can buy these packs of points, so let's say 500 points, and apply it to your system or apply it to that site. And then that would be what it consumes. So you can kind of manage, you don't necessarily have to wait for an expiration for it. You can just do it just to maintain your system. Every 6 months you can buy enough points to get it going or keeping it going for another 6 months, etc. Okay, so on the switch side, let me see what is kind of interesting here. Of course, you can manage all of the switch ports configurations. You can have the visibility for all of that as well. So you can see, all the ports, the switches, which ports are on. This one is basically a 28 port switch. You can look at, you can dive deeper into it and see or make any configurations you want for any particular port. So you can enable like, loop guard, etc. If you want to enable PoE on that port, you can schedule the PoE. So that's kind of cool as well. One advantage of that is, let's say, for example, you're in a hospitality and you want your access points to kind of just maybe reboot, every night, just to kind of clean it out of old sessions. Maybe 4 in the morning, half of your APs or a third of your APs, you can schedule it to reboot, at 4, and then 4:15 the next third, and then 4:30 the next third, right? So you have all of them kind of power cycle scheduled, maybe over the weekend or overnight, every night, or once a week, right? And that can help to just clean out anything that might be, stuck or, but most likely it's not stuck, because if it is stuck, then you would actually see it within Nebula. You'd get alerted that it's not available, which then you can log into this interface and then send a kind of a port reset. So the co-termination is by, I think it's either by site or organization. I need to double check, Wayne, on your question. sometimes I get confused myself, but I think on when you can apply the mass number of points to a whole organization. So you can manage it if you're doing, let's say, lifetime. The lifetime licensing is all based on the organization, whereas the free Nebula or the site can be its own like yearly subscription sites. That's my understanding. So, but I'll get back to you on the details of that, the licensing of the site and the organization. We have some slides on that, so I'll pull that out. I'll make note of that, and I'll send everyone that answer to that, because that is important on where does the licensing kind of is held, and like that can also dictate on how you want to split up organizations or sites or how you manage those as well. Okay, so within the ports, then you have all those configurations, VLANs, prioritization, etc., like you would find in our normal switches. Now, the thing is, keep in mind again, these switches are not, 100%, this feature set as our standalone, like our GS2210 series. They are a subset of it. So there can be some feature functions that are not there. But what we feel is that, again, the focus of Nebula is how to do it, manage the majority of the situations in a very easy kind of way. So the more features you add, you make it more complex. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't tell us and say, hey, you know what, this is a major application that is very common. We need to have, some sort of IGMP functionality to make, it for the mass market. Then, of course, we'll let you know, is that something that we want to implement in, or typically there is a workaround, because the inherent kind of foundation of these products still has capabilities for CLI. So we could run temporary, tweaks to it to do CLI commands to make that kind of configuration, make it work for you for those specific situations. Of course, it's not totally ideal because it is kind of a hack in some ways, but just keep in mind that it is probably there. We just have to tell you how to do it without going through the GUI itself. So you can do all your major GUI stuff, but then we can still do some sort of CLI to get to what you need to do. Okay, so that gives you kind of the overall view of the switch there. So on the gateway side, again, you have the same monitoring view, the reporting. It is a little bit different because it does allow for you to look at some other information. One thing that's very useful is that it also has the live tools. So you can see live internet traffic. You can see what are all the DHCP leases that are been given out. So especially if you're trying to troubleshoot, or you're trying to look for someone's MAC address based on their IP address, that's all viewable from here. You can do ping tests to kind of check, is there a weird route out to the internet that's broken? You can do trace route as well, so that you can see if there's any hops that are broken or something, again, just to troubleshoot, or even DNS. Maybe there's a bad DNS server that's out there and you can't resolve. That can also help to troubleshoot. Or you can decide to reboot the gateway. So you can use this as a software reboot, and it will just power cycle the device, maybe enable any changes that are there. Of course, you have the view of the ports and what's connected to where, as you can see here as well. We also, one of the main applications that we use our gateways for is for VPN. We're trying to make it so that your VPN connectivity between site and site, or client and site, is as easy as possible. And one of the things that we've enhanced is the visibility of the VPN tunnels themselves. So once you have a bunch of the VPN tunnels up here, you'll get a lot more of the data, the status, the traffic that's going, its uptime, the last time it's responded, like in the heartbeat, etc. So you're going to get visibility of what connections are up and down. If there are any, you can get notifications of that as you're monitoring it as well. Of course, then you go to the configuration section of it. If you've already been using this before, this is the new one. We've added content filtering to the NSG product line for Nebula. So if I enabled content filtering, you can set up a message. If they are denied, you can even send it to a redirect URL. So you go to something that's inappropriate or not allowed, we're going to redirect you to Disney.com. Now, you might say that that's also inappropriate, but that's just up to you. Category wise, you can then do blocking by categories. You can set up different we have templates that are already predefined if you want to use them. So let's say if you're, hey, I'm doing a parental control, we've kind of checkboxed what we think, or a few of the things. You can go ahead and enhance that as well. I'm not sure why parental control wouldn't include like phishing sites and things like that, but who knows. So if you do have feedback, again, like if you say, hey, you know what, the parental control, it seems to be lacking because it's allowing anonymizers, it's allowing, phishing and fraud and things like that, then, let us know. You can always use the help feedback button here, or use the support form. Click on that, send us a response basically saying, hey, we think we should enhance the content filtering this way. Just document it out, and our support form is being watched by basically 24/7, because our support team here will be seeing it, as well as our folks in Taiwan. All the R&D, there's assigned engineers who are just basically watching it. So it's not just the average engineer; it's their top engineers and R&D guys are looking at it, because we want to respond, be able to respond to you within 24 hours to make sure that we get the right information, or to tell you what we're going to do about it. So utilize that to send us any kind of feedback you have while you're using Nebula. Okay, so that's the content filtering side of things. The site-to-site VPN, again, just to make it as easy as possible. So you just create that like a topology. You just pick, is it a site-to-site? Is it a hub and spoke? You just define which networks and devices within that hub or within the organization is part of that VPN, and just basically flip the switch and it will turn it on. It will build you the VPN tunnel, IPsec information. So it's pretty straightforward. If you've done VPN before. You can also use this as an L2TP server. So you can enable that as the VPN server and make that connection there. There's the walled garden, when you're doing the hotspot or the authentication, the captured portal. You can set up different walled gardens. So you can set up, hey, you can do a mass IP or a mass name with the wildcard, star.zycel.com. So any sites that are under .zycel.com will all be allowed to go, even if they didn't authenticate yet. So this is pretty cool. You've gone to like airports and stuff like that, where even if you haven't logged on through the system to get internet access, they still give you access to like American Airlines or all the airline websites or the airport website, right? So you can still access some of those resources without having to log on. So this is what you can do. You can also create a splash page that provide those links of what is allowed on the walled garden. So this is a great opportunity for either advertising or partner sites that you may have that you want to have available without even having to log in through. You can do that. And then we've enhanced some of the captive portal things where you can actually upload your logo. You can customize a message if you're trying to host it all within the cloud section. Now, you can also point it to an external captive portal URL. So if you want to host it on your website or maybe your customer's website under their domain, you can enable that and send it. You can just download the custom captive portal page. You can make your HTML enhancements or anything like that. There's probably some snippets of code that you have to kind of leave in there for it to capture within our system. But otherwise, the look and feel, you can make it so it looks and feels like the hosted site that you want it to look like. And then, of course, you can also send after they've gone through the portal page, you can send them to a particular URL. This is great if, let's say you're doing a mall deployment, they've logged onto onto the Wi-Fi, it will redirect them to maybe a splash page that is a promo page. It can tell you, hey, these stores are having sales. Here's a free coupon for a pretzel here. Anything you want to do, and you can use that as either ad space for revenue or just use it to promote something that's happening within the mall. So that promotion URL is really effective with that. Be able to send people after they've logged on. Or I can just be like in a hotel. It goes to the hotel's their sites or their hotel sites page. So you can traffic shape as well. You can do the load balancing within the devices that have multi-WAN. I think all of our models on their NSG have multiple WAN capabilities. So you can choose either least load first or round robin. Least load first is just like what it sounds. If you have one WAN that is high utilization and the other one is low, then it will make sure that your internet access is going out the lower one. Now round robin is just kind of like a weighted round robin, so it kind of just flips back between the two. So your utilization between the two WANs will probably stay very similar in terms of consumption. So it just depends on what you're looking to do, but it has that availability. You can also do client limiting as well. So in hospitality, you want to make sure that just in the case that the user is infected, he gets infected and bombarded with thousands of sessions that opened up. You can do this so just kind of mitigate your damage so it doesn't overload your network or your gateway. Okay, and then on the organizational side of the GUI, allows for you to create sites. You can look at the different devices that are there, but more importantly, it's the license management side, like I showed you earlier, just to see the application, the expiration of the different services. Now, one thing to keep in mind right now, you'll see here the Nebula Security Service license. Before this past week, the security service was only the IDP and App Patrol. So you would have saw this would have been like a NSS-IDP kind of model number. What we've done is, because we've added content filtering and an antivirus basically to the gateway, it's merged now. So if you already have and deployed an NSG that has the IDP, you'll notice that it will automatically become the NSS SP, which includes the AV, IDP, content filtering, and App Patrol all in one security license. Now there is kind of maybe a little bit of a negative to it, is that the cost on it may go up just a little bit, just to offset, because we're now adding content filtering and antivirus to the whole system. We won't allow for you to buy just any single. It's just part of a security package. So I think from the partner level, your pricing probably won't change, but the end user price will probably look a little bit different, but not by much. We're still looking at the number to see if we want to make that change or not, or just leave it the same and just give it as a benefit. So if you already have the IDP of it, it'll switch over automatically. Now people will ask, well, what about new devices that I'm installing that only say that it has 1 year of IDP? Well, it actually will be the SP version when you install it. So don't worry about it. It'll just be that same price that you buy now. And any yearly license that you use now until the end of, I think, September, when they no longer will be available as just the IDP license, will switch over to the SP license. So you'll see those part numbers come out soon, come out shortly. But you can see as well the security licenses, they have their own kind of point consumption. So you'll see this one, if you have a Nebula security for this particular device, it's going to consume 70 points per year. So again, these points technically can be, you'd have to purchase the points for the security licenses on its own, which is kind of separate from the control center licenses. You can set up the organizational. So this is some of the things you can just go through and mess around with when you set up the demo site. Some of you, again, are already familiar with it because you already are using Nebula. One thing, because I don't have the licenses in here, with the control center, you can actually use the calculator to set up a co-termination date. So let's say you have a contract with your customer for the site, and you want to bill them, or have a certain a cycle time frame, or you want it to expire. You can actually use the calculator, put the date you want it to be its last expiration date, and it'll tell you, based on how many APs, gateways, and switches you have in your network, how many points you would need to buy, excuse me, to get to that expiration date. So the VPN members is basically when you're doing site to site or those kinds of VPN tunnels, you can choose who are part of that site members, and they will build you the associated necessary traffic kind of rerouting through whatever it needs to go through to get to, so if you can access site A and B and C from any of the sites that are there. So we have that ability to do that. Again, focused on VPN applications for the NSG. Now, of course, we've enhanced the content filtering, et cetera, so it's really a lot bigger from the security side of things. But again, if you're looking for like true like ransomware blocking at a very sophisticated level, or high level applications where you're trying to do something very specific with policy routes and things, this may fulfill that in terms of what your requirements are. But in some cases, if it's too complex, then we'd advise for you to use the USG series. And then, of course, your feedback to us on what didn't work or what doesn't fulfill would be helpful for us to see how we can enhance that into our Nebula platform. And again, there's still that CLI capability, because the fundamental foundation firmware of the NSG will still have those functions. It's just not enabled with the Nebula, so we can enable them through CLI if necessary. So we can guide you through those functions if you need that to happen. Okay, so that's just kind of in general. If you've never looked at the Nebula interface before, I would advise for you to get those kits if you don't have them, or install them and get them up and going, and mess around with it, and you can get figure out how you can creatively use the different sites and move configurations. So like, for example, I had mentioned earlier about the cloning, right? Because I'm in the free version, I'm not allowed to clone, but you can then create a site and you can clone from a different existing site. So you can actually, my advice would, you create like a template site, right? And you would put the configurations of an AP gateway for a, let's say, dental office template site. Create that site, tweak it until you're happy with how it's configured and how it's working. Use that as your template. So then when you create a new customer, you say Joe Schmo's dental office. You put in the site name here. You just clone from that site, and it will pull all those configurations from those APs, gateways, etc. And then the devices then you add to that site will then gain those configurations. So it becomes a very quick and easy way, once you've established what works and how you want to set it up with your, how you want to manage it and such, becomes a very quick way for you to install. Then it means you just have to get the 3 boxes in a kit, put it in a box, mail it off. Make sure you just scan those MAC addresses into the Nebula side, apply to that site. And once it gets online, boom, it's, literally within 5 minutes, it's online with the right SSIDs, right configurations, VLANs, whatever, out of the box. So really powerful. I keep joking with some of my coworkers here, like with Sean and such, and some of the salespeople. If I didn't enjoy doing this job, like what I do now, I'd be selling Nebula, because I have tons of people who would take advantage of that, and I've become a managed service provider. So you guys are all on the track that I would love to be on at times, but that's leaving that to you guys to handle that. What Wade did ask is the content filtering a separate license or is included in the standard license? So I think I answered that earlier. Just to reiterate, once you get to the security pack, that's all we're going to offer is one license, and that includes all security services. So that includes the content filtering, the antivirus, the intrusion detection, and the application patrol. So all of that will just be called now the security pack. So we're going to generalize it all instead of calling it just one. Derek did ask a question, your question about the roadmap to configuring WAN interfaces on Nebula Gateway. We'd have to check. There's always enhancements. We're on like a P2 enhancement right now. There's already P3 and P4 that's within the next few months. P4 is in December. So between now and December, there's a P3 kind of launch on the roadmap. We could talk to you, or we could talk to any of the partners directly if you want to see more of maybe the feature roadmaps. But right now, what I would advise for you to do is just within the Nebula forum, go ahead and express that. You don't have to look for if there was an answer or not. Just ask that question. Just cut and paste that right into that. That way, the HQ folk can track it and be able to answer to you, because they may say, hey, it's coming on P3, and give you a date on that. So do that, so then it'll be easy for us to all track that information. But definitely it would be useful. I think so. So my guess is that they probably have it on the plan, because there's, I mean, I think we have now 15,000 Nebula devices that have come online. So, you know, we're continuing to grow in that area. So we're looking forward to seeing more of that with your help. If there are any questions that you have specifically, or with sales team want to get in touch with that, you can either reach out to me, try@zicel.com. You probably have that already based on our communications we've had before, or you can reach out to your salesperson directly and get that information. If you have any kind of specific like configuration or certain applications that you're trying to do, you can always, again, reach out to Sandy or David, and set up a time that we can kind of walk through or look at your application, either myself or Marcus. Some of you have already dealt with Marcus, our systems engineer. He's great at being able to help you think through or configure a certain aspect of it. So we're here to help you. Again, your feedback is very valuable to us. So we hope that we have this communication, regular communication, and your feedback to us to provide for us, you know, how can we improve, right? We know the product's not perfect. I mean, even an Apple product is never perfect, right? So we want to be able to get your feedback on how we can make it easier for you or more beneficial for you to use Nebula. Because we feel like, you know, that is the direction that the market is going, and especially if you don't necessarily have a full system that you've invested in, this is a great way to get started, or even, you know, base your business on. So, you know, anything that we can do to help, whether on the hardware, the software, or even from the sales side, right? Different types of plan offerings, or licensing, time frames, or how can we make that easier for you? You know, either billing, or is it like, do you want like an automated subscription base, you know, where it's just auto pay or auto bill? Do you prefer to move towards a kind of a system where there's just kind of an affiliate, a revenue share, where you can set up these sites, and then it's, you manage them, and then you don't have to worry about any kind of licensing fees. It's just kind of a rev share that happens, within the system. There's those kind of things that have been thrown out. So we want to hear from you, like how you guys do business, because every managed service provider or every business has different customers, and they deal with things differently. Or we may have to be flexible where we offer both, right? So that's why we have the professional lifetime pack and the standalone, because you may have customers who, they're not committed for more than a year or two. We can't sign any contracts that far out. But then there's other customers who only sign 5-year contracts. So that's where lifetime becomes a great benefit, because it's, paid for off the bat, and then never have to worry about it again. So again, feedback to us, and we'd love to hear from you. So if there is no questions, or if you don't feel like, or no questions, then feel free to drop off. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording now. Again, I'll make sure that we get the